Hello and welcome to this video. In this video we will cover the history, development, and background of the TOEIC test. Now the test of English for International Communication, otherwise known as the TOEIC test, has a pretty rich history and really reflects kind of a more evolving need for business communication and the importance of having English proficiency in the workplace and also in the job market. Over the years, the TOEIC test has really evolved as the best English language test that is designed to measure modern and everyday English skills of people that are working in an international environment. So in this video, we will talk about the origins and the development of and the current status of the TOEIC test and really explore the significance and its impact it has on global communication. Again, as we understand the background of the test, you really put into context, just so you know, that when you put things into context, and there's a lot of research behind this, that shows that context really helps us to understand and learn a particular subject, because it connects with other areas of the brain and helps us overall in understanding as we are trying to learn related information to a context. So that is why it is important to cover the history and help us connect the future information we learn about the history and development of the TOEIC test so we can have that context. That way it will help us as we try to learn the TOEIC test and practice it. It will help us to connect it to long-term memory as we have practical explanations of its history. Now, context is important. As an example, in 1972, Bradsford and Johnson conducted a study that explored the role that context has in the comprehension and memory that, when you use context in learning, comprehension and memory increases. And it's really interesting, where they presented participants with an ambiguous passage describing a certain procedure without specifying what the passage was about and without giving much context. One group received the context before hearing the passage that was presented, and another was given the context after the message. But then a third group received no context. The results showed that participants who received context before learning actually understood and recalled much more effectively than those of the other two groups that received just the context after or received no context. This study really demonstrated that providing a meaningful context really helps people to interpret information much more effectively, to understand its meaning, and also encode information much more effectively. It is also crucial in memory because it makes the memory connect to long-term storage by making it relevant. Here's an example. This is the actual text that was used in the study. It says, the procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important to not overdo things. That is, it is better to do a few things at once than too many. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, they will be used once more, and the whole cycle will then have to be repeated. However, that is part of life. Even the best of us can't understand what is going on in this passage because there is no context. I share this with university students all the time as an example, and even the brightest ones can't even figure out what's really going on in this example. But then what if you show this image? Then everybody knows what is going on. Now imagine if you had this image displayed before you read the passage, so you understood the context before reading the passage. You would not only understand the passage, but you would connect it to long-term memory. So this is why I bring it up and emphasize this point, that many who take the TOEIC test often want the quickest, most easiest way to pass it, which is understandable, but they end up shooting themselves in the foot because when they skip the understanding part and actually the learning part and the actual test context, even though they thoroughly practiced something that was very similar to the assessment questions or the test questions, they usually won't be very successful because the test can change over time. We want to make sure that there is deep learning that is occurring, and we want to understand and put this test in context, because when you know that it was developed at the beginning for international business professionals, then you can understand why certain questions are phrased the way they are. It makes it more relevant to you. Okay, so the TOEIC test was developed by Educational Testing Services, which is a nonprofit organization that is based in Princeton, New Jersey. ETS is known for creating other standardized tests as well, such as TOEFL, the test for English as a foreign language, and GRE, which is the Graduate Record Examination Test. Now, the TOEIC test was actually developed because a request from the Japanese Ministry of International Trade and Industry, which is MITI, in the late 1970s. MITI had to recognize that there was a growing need for English proficiency among its Japanese business professionals and sought a standardized test and sought to have a standardized test that could really accurately measure these business professionals' ability to use English in a business context. Then in 1979, ETS launched its first TOEIC test. This test was designed to assess English skills of the native English speakers in a typical business environment, and it focused on mostly listening and reading comprehension. So the initial version of the TOEIC test really comprised of two sections, listening comprehension and reading comprehension. And these sections were scored on a scale of 5 to 495 points, with a total score range of 10 to 990 points. Now, following the TOEIC test introduction into Japan, the test quickly gained more popularity and was adopted by business and different organizations across Asia. The test relevance and its practicality was becoming recognized on a national and international level because it did such a great job of assessing English proficiency in a professional context. And that is what really contributed to its widespread use. And that is when more multinational corporations started to expand their need for employees to actively and effectively communicate in English, and they also wanted to use the TOEIC test. Then the 1980s and 1990s, the TOEIC test expanded beyond Asia and started to be used in Europe, North America, and many other regions. Companies then began using TOEIC scores as a criteria for hiring new employees, promoting current employees as well within the organization that they work in, and then educational institutions actually started to incorporate TOEIC preparation into their curricula as well. This test reached globally and was supported by ETS, the company, because ETS established test centers in different countries to make it more accessible to almost everyone. Now, as you can see, the TOEIC test gained more recognition, and ETS realized that it needed to adapt and improve the test to meet various demands. And also, it became scientifically valid and reliable to actually test what it was supposed to test. ETS did research on this, and also showed that it was a trustworthy instrument that individuals can use as a good indicator of English proficiency. They did this by getting feedback from test takers, employers, educators, and the TOEIC test has made several changes to the test format and content over the years. And in 2006, there were some pretty significant updates to the listening and reading portion of the test, with different question types such as conversations and different talks, and the inclusion of more authentic and diverse reading materials in that reading section. This aimed to help better reflect the real-world English usage and to measure practical communication skills. Then in 2007, ETS introduced a new speaking and writing section, which were actually separate components of the listening and reading sections, which measure the test taker's ability to communicate orally in English, whereas the writing test section would be more to evaluate written communication skills. All of these additions to the test provided more of a comprehensive assessment to determine English proficiency, addressing and evaluating all 4 language skills of listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Now, the rapid advancement of technology boosted the TOEIC test to make drastic changes in both the delivery of the assessment and the test itself, and also how to advance how it was administered. ETS started using computer-based testing to improve the availability and accessibility for test takers. This also improves faster scoring, better test security, and also reaches a wider range of people. In 2009, test takers were able to complete the TOEIC test speaking and writing sections on a computer rather than paper and pencil. As you can see, the TOEIC test has come a long way. And it is good, again, to know the background so you can understand when you take the test and when you study the test, the roots of it and the context of it. So it will help you to learn faster and connect what you study and practice into long-term memory. Okay, we'll see you in the next video.